Inspiration is kind of everything in photography, and you should be inspired by all manner of things, whether it's your favourite photographers, your favourite football team, your favourite people, things you pass in the street, the sky. It should all influence you, and I think it's a good thing to have visual influences, or more like creative influences, like particularly for photographers, other photographers. So today I'm going to talk about the biggest influences on me in photography, the kind of top 5, if you like, photographers who have probably been and continue to be the biggest influence on me. So I'm not saying these guys are masters. If you look at my last video, you'll clearly understand I don't think they're any masters, but they're probably been the biggest influence on me across my 20-year career. Anyway, let's have a look at the top 5 photographers in the whole of history according to the Lance Burkitt Encounter. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to episode 27 of the Lance Burkitt Encounter. So today I'm going to speak about my favourite top 5 photographers of all time. And it's a difficult thing, I think, to pin down people who have inspired you that much to a point where when somebody says to you, the old elevator challenge, tell me in 60 seconds who your top 5 photographers are. And you're like, oh, bloody hell. Luckily, or otherwise for me, I think, I'm not that heavily influenced by many photographers, and I don't mean that in a nasty, dismissive way. I mean, it has to be something different, something left field, something a bit crazy for me to sit up and go, oh, going to give that person a follow and a bit more study. So it's not that difficult for me to pick my top 5 or top 10. I'm going with top 5 because top 10 takes a bit of time. Top 5 I think we can get through in an hour, and the reason I selected these 5 is simply because they were, when I first started getting into photography, they were the people I looked at. I think because that's what appealed to me initially, the style, the genres, the quality. And because I spent a bit of time trying to get good at everything photography-wise, these people have definitely been the 5 most influential in that respect, and I've continually gone back to them. I think you can clearly see some of their influences in my work, but it comes down to what I said in the last video about not being masters of photography. There's no masters of photography. I'm not saying any of these top 4 or 5 are masters. What I'm saying is what they do, how they do it, has appealed to me, and what I took from them has like stuck with me and made my work what it is, how it looks, how it feels. So the top 5 is probably easier than the top 10. The top 10 I might have a few, a bit. And I don't. There's a couple. Well, there's definitely one surprise in there, probably for most people. But I think in the main, there'll be people you've heard me talk about on the podcast before, and they're all 5 people they influence me in different ways. Some of it is attitude, some of it is process, some of it is visual, some of it is personality, definitely. I think having these influences definitely shaped my photography, and I think one of them we'll talk about shortly was famous for saying don't copy, steal, and I mentioned that again in the last video. And if you steal ideas off people who influence you, you'll build on them and make them your own, I think. We don't live in a void, we don't exist in a void, and I think everything that you experience as a person, you should, and probably do anyway without realising it, bring it into your photographic world, and to you kind of impart that on yourself without knowing. So it could be you've had a shit day at the office, or you had a near miss in the car, or you woke up and it's a beautiful day and you've just thought, oh, I'm going to photograph that. Everything's an influence, but I think photographers, like musicians, like painters, like, I don't know, certainly most creative walks of life and people have certain genres, trends and things that they follow because that's what they like themselves. And the people you follow tend to come out of those things. So it's a good thing. It's definitely a very good thing to have influencers and be able to call on them and nurture that relationship you have with what they do. Because I think that it invigorates you to go and create new stuff, better stuff, by stealing ideas, by stealing the influence, not copying. We talked about this previously, but literally stealing it and making it your own. And I certainly think, well, I know for a fact my pictures and my style would not look anything like what they do without these. Certainly 4 of these 5 top 5 photographers, in my opinion. It's not a definitive list. This is not my way of podcasting and saying to you guys, you've got to follow these 5 photographers or you're never going to get anywhere in your life, or your work will be shit or you'll be boring. This is just my 5 biggest, continuing biggest influencers. And funnily enough, considering most of my career has been really fashion and portrait work, that's where I work commercially and where I made money. Not all of these 5 photographers come from that genre, that pathway. They're quite left field compared to that, which I guess is good because it shows that even though I predominantly worked as a fashion and portrait photographer, that my other work draws influence from other people, and I think it all comes together to make my style, whether I'm shooting portraits or fashion, or whether I'm shooting landscapes or skyscapes, or whether I'm shooting a Pepsi bottle. All that influence comes into what I do, and certainly how I approach shoots, how I edit and output things. So the first person I'm going to talk about is probably the biggest influence on me in terms of technical stuff. And obviously other people will have had some influence on me technically during my time, but this person's probably had and continues to have the biggest technical influence on me of them all. So without further ado, we'll talk about the first biggest influence on my career, or what I think is number 5 in the top 5 photographers, certainly in my view and in my experience and in my world. And the number 5 is a very fine, fantastic photographer and technician, sadly deceased. Never got to meet him in the flesh, never got to speak to him about his process and his work, but nonetheless continues to be a massive influence on me, and that is Ansel Adams. So I came across Ansel Adams quite early in my fledgling photographic career, and I think probably by accident. I think he was, we're talking 20 years ago, early internet still, search engines. I think Google was probably around starting to swallow up everything, but certainly wasn't what it is now. So I was probably fishing for some inspiration, trying to look at who was the best, who were the gurus, if you like, and came across Ansel Adams' work quite early. And I must admit, when I first saw his work, I think maybe because it was wholly film based, and I read quickly and discovered quickly that his processes were massive and quite long and quite arduous. I think initially I thought, oh, fuck that. Even though I thought his work was like, wow, wish I could make my work look like that now. Didn't quite know how to and whatnot. So I think Adams, for the first, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years of my career, I was on a back burner. I was aware of him. I knew kind of who he was and what he'd done. But he was certainly a back burner. And it was only really when I figured out that I needed to expand my skill set beyond what you might call basics or approach. It was slightly before, good few years actually, before I did my master's degree. But I was starting to think that way. I was starting to think, look, I've attained a level of quality that I can do the same stuff over and over, but my work was a bit meh, bit normal, bit average, and I was looking to see what the people I felt were massively better or greater or different to others were doing and how they did it. So I remembered the work of Adams, and I think you'll have heard me say on many podcasts that I see in contrast when I'm looking around the room now, I don't quite see things in milky tones. I see stark contrast. That's just how my brain interprets things. And my photographs certainly then didn't look that contrasty. In fact, I'd gone through a period of milk, making them look like a milky brown sepia, and thought it was great. Looking back now, it's fucking horrendous. It was like Amateur City, you know what I mean? It's like, it's worse than that old, let me just black and white everything apart from the flower. Let's leave that in colour. It was worse than that. So I was looking for a way to, I think probably from memory, looking for a way to, how can I get there? And I kind of stumbled probably a few years earlier across Guy Gowan and his work and his processes for making good black and whites. But I think at that time, if I'm honest with you, I knew how to make them. I just didn't quite know why. It was an interpretation thing, I think. So I remember that Adams had got these mega black and whites, which were black and white, not grey and white. And what intrigued me the more I looked at Adams' work was how he was kind of showing you what I'd seen. His photographs looked like, to me, what I felt like I'd seen, and my photographs didn't. And I wanted my photographs to get like that, to look like what Adams was showing. Now, I then, obviously, through looking at his work, seeing some stunning work, I mean, we'll just put one on screen now just to start with. Probably, I don't know whether it's my favourite or whether it's it's because of the subject content, because those of you that know me know that I like to do a bit of photography of the moon and landscapes of the moon. Maybe that's the throwback to this kind of inspiration, but looking at this picture and thinking, I was thinking, fucking hell, that's what I see. I mean, obviously I don't see the same landscape because I live in Yorkshire, in the suburbs, in the burbs, and I see mostly rooftops and the moon. But that's kind of what I see. The detail from dark black to white highlight with detail, and all the myriad of zones, as he calls them, across that. And so I started studying how Adams had got to the point where he was making pictures that he could manipulate, is that the right word? Or he could coax to get them to look like how he saw it. And it was a bit of a penny drop moment for me, from memory, because I hadn't really understood that until this kind of time. And what I kind of took from that early initial Adams inspiration was something along the lines of, if he can get it like that, I can get my work to be like that. Sorry, just getting interrupted by the internet. I was thinking, if he can present what he sees, I can do that. I just need to figure out how to do it. I know I've got the digital tools through Guy Gowan, but I wasn't quite pushing things there yet. So I started looking at our friend Mr. Adams and his processes, and you can't, if you're looking at the work of Ansel Adams, you can't fail to get to the point where you have to understand the zone system. And the zone system with Ansel Adams is the thing that kind of defines his look and the quality of work. And if you just do a quick scoot around just to find out a little bit about how he and his colleague came to present or invent, if you like, and utilise the zone system. It's Fred Archer was his friend's name. It's work of genius, and it's something that I, through all my photography work since what am I talking, late maybe 2009, 10, 11 kind of time. It's from that point on I started contrasting my work, whether it was fashion, location, whatever, to look like what I had seen. And it was off the back of not understanding the zone system, because that's another piece of work entirely. It was understanding the limits within dynamic range and within presentation and within how to get a digital file there without ruining it, making it too noisy, etc. So I studied the zone system and Adams' work kind of hand in hand. I was doing some darkroom work then, but not massively, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't have the time or the inclination to do it digitally to the degree that Adams did. But there's a couple of videos out there, a couple of good documentaries on YouTube, I think, about Ansel Adams, or people retrospectively looking at Adams' work, and you can see his darkroom and his editing processes that were left set up, and the detail he went to on each picture to make sure he could do a print, another print. I can imagine that. Ansel, or Ansel's agent more like, I'd like that moonrise, can I have one? Yeah, I'll print it for you tomorrow. Can you imagine now? So we're digital, aren't we? We can get there, we can make the moon picture, and we can just print it off. It's all saved. But then he would have had to go back, and he's making each picture individually. And I think he talks about some of that in his documentaries. So writing it down, making notes, and it's something that as a teacher I brought into my students' world was, even though you're doing it digitally, make notes of what you're doing. Until it's ingrained in your brain that heavily, you can't forget. Write down, make notes, it's good practice. Write down what you did and why and how. And that's everything from, when you're talking about darkroom work, from the temperature of the room to the water to all that stuff. Not so much heavily in digital, but there are other considerations, aren't there? Working on a different computer, different screen colours, different colour spaces. If you're printing your work on different printers, there's all that kind of stuff to consider and think about when you're making prints. So all of that kind of skill for me came from studying. And when I say studying, I mean actually studying to some depth Ansel Adams and his processes, particularly how, it's slightly different, isn't it? Because the zone system's looking at how light affects light sensitive paper, but the basics of it, I taught it digitally in layman's terms. There should be detail in the highlights, there should be detail in the shadow, and there should be detail all across the spectrum. And it's difficult because the camera only sees what you tell it to see. But with that approach in mind, keeping the zones, looking at the zones, thinking of your work in terms of zones and grades, and not being happy until you can see in your histogram that you're on the grade that you want. That's what I've always taught my students, and that's why I hope they understand the value of exposure rather than just, that's a nice picture, it looks great on that screen. And it all comes from Adams and me studying Adams in some depth over some years and doing some darkroom practice and failing fucking miserably. I'll be the first to admit I can never get close to doing anything remotely like Adams did with his own system in the darkroom. Nowhere near it. But I had a go at it and got to see and feel some of these processes and make the mistakes. But from a digital perspective, whether that's because I understood that better or I just grasped it easier, it's physically easier. It's from a time constraint perspective, it's easier. So I think I just flourished a bit more with the digital side of it because I had the ability to do it more easily, probably. So his influence visually stimulated me and definitely bled into my work. His technical and skill approach definitely influenced me, even though I did mine digital and his was all predominantly all film. That understanding, that kind of discovery, if you like, has been with me now for 15 years maybe, and I've not really changed how I approach my photography in terms of taking the shot, visualising it, finishing the shot from an edit, making a print in that time from that influence. And like I said, that goes across everything from fashion, beauty, portrait to landscape, skyscapes, street even, because I find it allowed me to show pictures how I see things, which is for me a great benefit, because until I discovered that and figured out I could do that, I was struggling to do that. So Ansel Adams was a massive influence on me and continues to be. I just put a few pictures of mine in this folder just to go through. I mean, I just showed you Moonrise, but if we put the Moonrise shot back on screen, and then beside it we put my shot from a small town near here called Ully from 2015-ish. I think you can see the influence on that every influence I had for Adams in terms of approach, in terms of the zoning system. If you look at that shot, I would have taken that shot probably a few years before, but it wouldn't look like that. It'd be quite milky, or there'd be no that middle field just below the horizon would have had nothing on it. It would have been quite bland, and the foreground with the moving grass would have not been as contrasty or highlight either. So I might have got a similar shot, but the final thing would have been flat, and it wouldn't have been how I saw it. And that's exactly what I saw that day, only in colour. And that comes from the Adams influence. And again, I think if we look at San Francisco, he did this picture of San Francisco, and it's a great shot. Again, you can see through it how he's got his zone system working. Just even on that electricity pylon or whatever that tower thing is in the foreground there, that is, the contrast on it. It's so difficult to photograph without it being black or white or grey or in between. And if you look in the hills, I mean, this is a digital scan. The original picture will look much better, I'm sure. But you can see detail throughout. Where there's black, there's detail. Where there's white, there's detail. And it stuck with me, that. And, a lot of this detail is sunlight coming through the cloud, isn't it? So where you've got shadow on the ground and highlights, that's the thing that's causing it. And when I was in Athens recently, I had this view from the top of the viewpoint of the hill. For the name of the hill, I can't even say it, so I'm not going to try and say it, but I'll put it on the screen for you. A viewpoint of Athens, and just looking at it and watching it, and I can see the highlights and shadows on the ground caused by the sun and the clouds. And I took a picture, and then using my tried and tested knowledge of how to get my picture in Photoshop to tell me that better, for me to be able to show what I saw, the influence on that is clear. I think between the two pictures, between mine and Adams. Now, obviously, I'm not saying mine's better or worse than Adams. I'm just saying you can clearly see the influence. And I haven't stolen it. I haven't purposely gone out to copy that picture. I've just had the presence of mind when I've been out photographing to notice that and to apply what I learned through studying Adams over the last 15, 20 years to my own work. And without that influence, my work wouldn't look like it does. It would look like, probably like every other person's picture, took a picture that day, like a postcard, and that's not what I saw. So Ansel Adams has been a massive influence on me in the last best part of 20, maybe probably 17, 18 years really, but certainly over the last 2 decades. Is the one, from a style, from an approach, from a understanding, expectation, a quality point of view. Adams, for me, has been the single biggest influence on how I approach my photography and how I shoot and edit my work. And if we just look through a few more of Adams, I mean, Snake River, I mean, I can see the influence in my work and how I approach it and how I shoot and edit. But I don't understand, even if you don't like landscape photography, even if you don't care for pictures of skies and rivers and hills, how could you not look at that picture and go, fuck me, how's he done that? How has a photographer got a piece of equipment that can only see one part of that well, because you've set it up to look for f9 or f10 or whatever it is, but yet we can see it like the human eye sees it? How's he done that? And it's that I brought into my photography. And although like I said, I'd done a digital zone system kind of approach, it's based off his approach, how to shoot, slightly underexposing, bringing things back in the digital darkroom for me, making sure the highlights, shadows, zones sit where you want them to sit and give you what you saw. And I have a much easier time doing it than I'm sure Ansel did, because I can edit and do my stuff. I can fine-tune it much more easily than Adams could. So there's no comparison in terms of skill and ability from Adams to me, but the inspiration he gave me and all that stuff that I looked and liked and understood that he did, I stole it and built it into my approach. And I'm glad I did, because I love the work that I make. I love how it looks, because it looks like how I saw it. And I think if you can get to a point in your life where your inspirations can allow your work to thrive in that way because of how you've approached, understood, assimilated, stolen inspiration, clear inspiration, then I think your work will definitely be better for it. So I hope that gave you a quick overview, stroke understanding of my appreciation of Ansel Adams. Have a look at his work if you've not. Buy a few of his books, watch a few documentaries, and see if there's anything there that you could take and apply to your own work. Number 4 in my top 4 favourite, best, amazing photographers of all time is a fine gentleman, another one who's sadly no longer with us, another one who I'd love to have picked his brains and got down and dirty into, his nuances and how he felt and thought, because he is one of those photographers that definitely was a thinking man's photographer and really had a grasp of what he wanted to do, and you can see that in the strength of his images. And that is the fantastic Richard Avedon. So Richard Avedon. So when I first started doing photography, I was kind of a bit of a piss poor glamour photographer, if you like. It was just something to be the genre I fell into. But after a couple of years, 18 months, 2 years, I was so fed up with it. It was so easy and boring. I just wanted to do something more creative, something that stimulated me more, something that made me have to push myself and figure stuff out and learn. So I started looking at fashion photography, really, because I'd heard it was difficult to get into, a closed shop, if you like, dead man's boots. So that alone would push me to get on and try and do it. But not just that, it was like, it's more difficult to get good fashion pictures than it is probably any other genre, I think. And by good fashion pictures, I mean the storytelling side of it, the wow, that stops you, makes you stop and look. And I'm not talking about fashion advertising, I'm talking about fashion. I'm talking about model, outfit, backdrop, boom. So that's kind of where I started to look, and Avedon was kind of always on the horizon, because as you're getting into photography, it's like when you're getting into anything, you hear the big names bounded about, don't you? And I'd followed and looked at some of the more modern fashion photographers, Nick Knight, people like that, and not really thought, oh, that's inspiring. So me being me, I looked back past that, and I looked back into as far back as the 40s. I mean, I was looking at what fashion illustration was like before photography took on, and seeing the guys in the 40s, 50s and 60s who switched it around and made it different. And Avedon was one of those people. And the thing that struck me quite early on with Avedon, even in his non-fashion work, even in his non-commercial work, the fact that every bloody still photograph he took looked like there was movement. It looked like a slow-moving film. Every single one of them just made me think, holy shit, how has he done that? So I started looking at Avedon purely and simply because it intrigued me, how he got his subjects to emote in such a way where it looked like a film. You're watching it, he's not even equating it to a still from a film. I mean, when you're looking at a picture, I'll give this one as an example of Sandra Bennett that he took, which is not even a fashion picture. This is a portrait he took out in the American West, where he went round the American West, found interesting people, stuck a white backdrop behind them, took pictures of them. So this is a still. It's not a still from a moving image, it's a still of this young girl staring at the camera in a normal, everyday appearance. But it looks like she's moving. And there's a bit of movement in her hair, maybe there's a bit of wind. But to me, it feels like she's talking to me. It feels like there's something other than just a still picture of somebody sitting there going. I can feel a presence, intense stare, bit of movement in her hair. She almost looks like she's walking or about to walk. That's what made me think, fucking hell, Avedon's a genius. An absolute genius. Hate that word. I just spent the full podcast telling people that there's no such thing. But in this instance, in this kind of like wow moment, I thought, I want to be able to make fashion and portrait pictures like that. How does he do it? So I watched some videos. I forget the name of there's a real popular video, and you can get it on, I think you can get it on YouTube, but it might be in Spanish or some foreign language. I've got his book up there, his biography somewhere. Maybe it's at home, but anyway, I've got his biography, some autobiography, it's a big chunky book. And so years after I'd been influenced by him visually, I got into him and understood a bit more about how he operated, what he was, who he was as a person, the trials and tribulations he faced as a human. Him photographing his dad dying, and that's another story altogether. But in terms of fashion, portraying people photography, it dawned on me after a while that it's when you get people to buy into what you're doing, to trust you, it's more than trust. It's almost like they do understand what you're trying to create. That's when these kind of pictures start to become, I guess obvious is the wrong, when these kind of pictures start to come to you once you become natural at making connection. And if you watch how Avedon worked, past tense, in all or any videos you can see of him, it's that work in the person. And I don't mean that in a pushing and grinding, I mean it's a connection thing. How we tell them what he wants, how we told them. I know I'm from Yorkshire, but that was poor, wasn't it? How we told them, how we articulated what he wanted them to do until they did it, just astounds me. And again, stealing that from that point on to try and build it into my pictures. I'm not claiming to be Avedon. I'm not claiming to be anywhere near the same ballpark as Avedon. But although this picture of mine was a staged thing, plain white background, one light, don't look at me, just be yourself. Even though this was a fashion shot, not a portrait shot. Whether it's the scarf or the hat or the semi-shadow, because how the lights were and the reflection off the whiteboard, gives me a little bit of movement. Not massively, not as on point as what Avedon's was, but that's where I'm coming from. This is probably 2-3 years into my photographic career, starting to feel like I need some energy, something more than just that nice picture. And again, these kind of ones from a fashion perspective, I mean, it's quite low down. Most of the time you would teach a student not to get that low down, you tell them to get waist height, but look at the legs. If those legs get any longer, and that's a quirk of how he's taking the picture, low down. But it's the movement, isn't it? She's perfectly still because she's posed for a still, but the movement, the shape of her body, her dress moving, her hair moving, a toe just slightly coming off the ground, all those things just push it into a moving image. And it's just brilliant. It's just sheer brilliance. And I think as a fashion photographer, when you look at modern stuff, even I've got some of the favourites like Mario Testino's work I like. Nick Knight's work I don't mind, but they're not this. And I know everybody's different. Peter Lindbergh and all those other good photographers, interesting photographers, good at what they do, make nice work. But this, for me, Avedon's early fashion work and some of his advertising work, is just nails it for me. And it's that combination of not always technical nous, because he did have people to help him, and he certainly had people retouching his work for him. He made no bones about that. I'm not a massive advocate of people retouching your work for you, as you might have known. I've said that on other podcasts, but I'll let Avedon off here because he could afford to, and it worked for his workflow and his work. But the retouch didn't make the dress move or the person make it. It's that connection. It's how he articulated what he wanted to the model and got it. And I've taken that big influence from Richard Avedon into my work. And again, this is nothing new. Loads of people have done pictures of people jumping. The jumping picture for fashions are not new, but that's where my influence came to do it. She looks like she's moving, but she's still. I mean, she's about to move because she's coming down. But to make a still image look like it's moving is a trick. And I've worked with Amy quite a few times, and we had a very good rapport and a great working relationship. And that really does help when you explain to a model that you're trying to achieve this, and they get it. Sometimes they don't, but most do. And you work on it and you get it. For me, that's where it's at. And that all, I think, not just Avedon, but a massive influence on Avedon was that how to get people to move in when they're still. And that's certainly stayed with me throughout my whole fashion portrait people career. And it's mostly about connection and a bit about technique. So, of course, I like Avedon's work, his other work, which is advertising. The Beauty and the Beast shot with the Natasha Kinski, the German model. You might say there's no movement there, but that snake's moving. And the little lick of the tongue in her ear, just at the moment of shot, is, again, a work of beauty. And it looks like she's laid still and the snake's moving around her. And again, that's another trick of movement, connection. I mean, I have a healthy fear of snakes. If I walk down the street and there's a snake there, I'm crossing the road, mate. But models, particularly ones who have an interest in making great work, will do things like this. And this is just simple genius, isn't it? It's simple creativity. But having the presence of mind to just wait till that bit of movement comes, and it's the snake's tongue that gives you the movement. Plus the shape of the model's figure, the snake, how it's similar in shape to her, gives it a little movement. There's movement there, even though it's a still. And I just think it's something that many modern fashion photographers, I don't know if ignore or don't understand or don't like it, I guess, but I don't see a lot of that. Again, a recent shot I did of Daniela a couple of years ago. She's not moving. She's just sat laughing, but she's pretty still. But how she just animated to me, because we've worked together before, we've got a good working relationship. She listens to what I say, she understands it, she knows what I'm trying to do. We get a nice shot that's a still, but that looks like there's movement in it. Avedon's most famous shots, this was again done by, I've spoken about this in a previous podcast, so I won't labour it, by Rankin, when he did his 7 photos that changed fashion, and made a crap effort to copy this, recreate this if you like, using a fab model, but different day, different person, different approach, doesn't understand movement, didn't get this. And again, time, place, people, direction, connection, understanding, getting the narrative across to the model, what you're trying to do. Probably getting a bit lucky with the 2 elephants raising the foot at the same time. But Davima, just a still picture, but because of her shape, her size, her elongation of her arms, there's movement. It looks like there's a little dance going on, and we're about to do a step, and it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant, and those kind of things stayed with me. Once I'd discovered Avedon, I was kind of like beyond excited. And again, another model, I worked with this model once, we worked for a full day, Monica, but she listened and she learned pretty quickly, and I just said, I want you to give me a innocent energy, I want you to move but don't move. And this is what we got. And again, for me, it feels like she's talking, she's motivating, she's just going, when really it's a 125th of a second still, but influenced by Avedon, heavily influenced by Avedon. And probably another bunch of techniques and approaches that I've stolen, and I'm quite happy to admit that. Number 4 on my list of top 5 photographers of all time is the wondrous and amazing and highly influential on me, Richard Avedon. Number 3 on my top 5 photographers of all time is a gentleman whose approach to photography absolutely astounds me to this day. That you've got the presence of mind, the kahunas, the balls, the will, the insanity to go to these places and do these things and still make fucking amazing pictures. It just astounds me that there are living people that can do this stuff. So number 3 on my top 5 of all time photographers list is Mr. Don McCullin. So Don McCullin, I've always known about Don, but because I've never done war photography or that kind of photography, I'd never studied his work that intently. I'd seen his pictures and thought, sooner than me. But the more I started looking into Don, and I got into Don more when I became a teacher of photography, and I wanted to expand out my own knowledge on photography, but also try and influence students to get off their arses and go and do something good, rather than just become another portrait, another wedding. I was looking for people who could inspire students to go and fucking get on a boat, bus, train, bike and find stories. So initially I was looking at people like Tim Etherington. I mean, Tim could have been on my list. He's definitely in the top 10, I think, Tim. And through getting into Tim around 15 years ago, maybe 16 years ago, I started looking more into people like Don McCullin, Eddie Adams and a few others, just to see what kind of work they were producing in ridiculous circumstances. And if you read this book, Don McCullin, Unreasonable Behaviour, a lot of it struck home with me, because a lot of it is him disrespecting, I guess, and pissing off his wife because he's coming home from a war-torn country on Friday and by Sunday he's gone to another one. And how his wife coped with that is beyond me. But calling the book Unreasonable Behaviour, when you read it, it covers a lot of bases, that title in the book, but that's one of the things that's unreasonable about his approach to photography. I mean, and he talks in it about, he was skinned, broke, no money, got the opportunity to go to Germany to photograph some interesting Berlin Wall style stuff, and didn't even tell his wife, just took his last bit of money from, I think even his editor had said to him, don't fucking do that, don't go there. But he did, and got the winning pictures because of his enterprise. And it was that, more than his style of pictures or his actual photography, it was more his attitude that struck a chord with me and made me think, I want to look at this guy more. And when you read Don's book, I mean, some of the stories are just horrendous. I can't imagine being in a situation where you can photograph somebody who's become shell-shocked. It's frightening to think that you've got the presence of mind to photograph somebody who's in a place of sheer hell. Some of the stories in this book, he talks about coming across someone who's just been shot to death or been blown up, but it's his job as a reporter to take the picture, and he does, and he goes, takes the picture, and he's gone. Comes close a few times to some serious injury, whether he's in Northern Ireland or whether he's in Vietnam or other, silly places where most people would not ever want to go. And he's taking pictures which are just, it's difficult to describe them, because, the picture here of albino boy in a black community, obviously malnourished and whatnot. But he gets the picture anyway. It's a couple of things for me with Don. It's his get up and go. It's like, I want to be a photographer. I want to photograph all these interesting, horrendous things around the world. How can I do it? Well, I'm not going to be able to do it while I'm sitting in my bed watching TV, am I? Or I'm not going to sit here when I'm 18 and go, I wish I'd done that. He got off his arse, by hook or by crook, got to places, Some of the stories in this book are horrendous. When he was arrested and thrown in jail, didn't know from one day to the next whether they were going to be killed in front of a firing squad, managed to escape by the skin of his teeth, literally, came home, went straight back somewhere else, because he wanted, photography was more important than life to him, and he wanted to do that. That's the photographer he was, and it's borne out in his pictures. And if you look at some of his pictures, you can feel that, you can obviously feel that they're, I don't know how you would say it, you can feel the fear, you can see the situation, you can feel the palpable scale of war, but he still manages to make sure that you understand there's a human there. And that again comes from him, his desire to tell that person's story, whether it's, you know, somebody who's had a leg blown off or somebody who's literally lying dead. He sees it as his duty to be on the plane, to be in with the platoon, with his camera, pocket full of film, all weathers, all temperatures, all conditions, being shot at, even though he's clearly marked up as a correspondent or a what do they call him, reporter. His life's in danger all the time, but he's there doing it. And I think if you can gain any inspiration as a photographer, particularly young photographers who don't yet have any responsibilities, no family of their own, no kids of their own, no big mortgages, none of that. If you can, I mean, there's enough conflict in the world, isn't there? There's enough conflict around the world for you to go and fill your boots for the next 100 years. As hateful as that is, there is. It's funny enough, though, that Don McCullin did say recently in an interview that he's not been allowed to go to Ukraine. His colleagues weren't allowed to go to the Ukraine. I wonder why that is. But anyway, for any fledgling photographer wanting to become something other than just a photographer, have a read of Don McCullin's books, but certainly look at his work. But that one, Unreasonable Behaviour. If you've got the balls that he's got to get up and go and do what he did, hat off to you, go and do it, make a career, because you will. Because yes, there are other war correspondents and photographers out there, but Don's single-minded, I'm fucking going, I don't care what you say, attitude is what, for me, sets him apart from others. And his willingness to put himself in harm's way and take the picture anyway. And, you know, he could have been assassinated a handful of times in his career, and he's managed to see it all out. And he now, as you know, semi-retired, I guess is the right word, still does some photography, but does mainly landscapes and stuff like that. But if you look at his pictures across the piece, particularly his non-war pictures, you can still see that grit in them. You can still see that he's only got the picture because he got off his arse and went there. And by went there, I mean, you know, his local, this picture here of the mining town with the broken fence and stuff. It's great. It's a great human story, isn't it? Right there. But again, he's only got it because he's got off his arse, gone there, seen the opportunity. And opportunities don't come to you in your bedroom or your back garden or in the pub, do they? They come to you. Well, I guess you might get some in the pub. They come to you when you get out and do it. And I think Don McCullin is the one who made me realise that although I had a studio and I had access to models and I could take pictures, if I wanted to be better, more rounded, able to pass more on, have more experience, was to get out of the studio and go and take pictures. And that's when I did start doing that and started doing landscapes, skyscapes, nightscapes, street. I never went to be a war correspondent. 2 reasons. One, I'm bullshit scared. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't advocate for war. A good way to cancel all the wars immediately would be to say, all right, you want to go to war, fine, but your kids have got to do it. That'd stop them. I wouldn't want to go and photograph rich men's wars, to photograph poor people's dead kids. Couldn't do that, but I'm also frightened. And I was scared of flying until recently, so I wouldn't have had that opportunity. Plus, I had young kids, and it was the wrong thing for me, although I do often wish I had the cojones that he got. But it did influence me to go out and make pictures, which I would never have made because I was comfortable in a studio. So I think if all you take from Don McCullin's work, I mean, his photographs, his style, his approach is very honest, very... I mean, you consider he's got 60th of a second or 1/25th of his lucky to get a shot of a situation. and then move on, or be shot at, or be bullied, or be beat up. It's pretty good. I mean, the exposures are good, the quality's good, they're always sharp, all that kind of stuff's good. On film, in the shit. Just be inspired by his motivation. The motivating factors which pushed him on. If you can grab a little ounce of that, you'll be great, and you'll go on to be a successful photographer yourself, because you'll keenly understand the importance of getting off your arse and going doing it. And for me, that is where Don McCullin is head and shoulders above most other photographers, because he's got the presence of mind. He's got the cojones to get up and go and do it. He's got the presence of mind to shoot it properly, well considered, while he's there. And you will be hard pushed, I think, to find a better war photographer, a more rounded human being, and fundamentally a nice guy. And he's still alive, and I would like to get to speak to him and shake his hand and say thanks for all what you've done for photography, because he's one of the guys that really has made sure photography has stayed up there over the years. So that's it for me on Don McCullin, number 3 in my top 5. So on to number 2. So on to number 2 in my best favourite photographers of all time, and this person is probably the most famous photographer of all time, certainly in many people's eyes, and it's a name that as soon as you hear it, you kind of know who he is and what he did. And that's not by accident. That's because if you're going to leave your mark on anything in life, leave a mark like what this guy did, because they'll be talking about him in 100 years, never mind today. So my number 2 in my top 5 photographers of all time is Mr. David Bailey. So David Bailey, or Bailey as he likes to be called, Mr. Bailey, that's one of his recent books, look again. When I decided to get into fashion and people photography properly, and I was looking at people like Avedon that I've already talked about, above all those people, the person that really jumped out to me more than any was David Bailey. And some of it was because of his photographs and how he took them and what he did. But the biggest influence that Bailey has had on me has been his attitude and his fuck you, I'm doing this attitude. And I've always been a little bit of a rebel. My friends, family and colleagues might tell you I've got myself in a few scrapes over the time because I like to be honest. And so I think that's probably why I was drawn into Bailey in certainly his approach to photography and his approach to working with people. Him not suffering fools, and him being honest about how he thinks about things and people. And I think if there was more of that in the world would be an easier place to live, because honesty breeds passion, it breeds understanding, it breeds better communication. And one of the reasons why we shit at communicating as humans is because we don't tell each other the truth. So I love that about Bailey, and watching early documentaries on his life, and I'm not talking about that blow up thing which was supposed to be on his life but it isn't really. I'm talking about documentaries like I don't know, you'll find them on YouTube, just type in David Bailey documentaries. Watch him at work, and it's great because even though he's the best, I think, at getting an emotion out of a person, getting contact and connection with a person, he doesn't always do it by going, oh, you're lovely, you're beautiful, stand there, Sometimes he'll say, what you move for? I didn't tell you to move. And I've tried. I'm not quite that brutal with people. Maybe I am, maybe I just don't realise I am. But I'm very similar in my approach, as in, I don't want bullshit. I don't want bells and whistles. I just want you to turn up and do what I want you to do. And Bailey's very like that. And the story of him when he saw Johnny Depp coming towards the studio, and he just thought he was a tramp, so he made him sit in the skip, took a picture. That's the thing, isn't it? That's the ticket. So when I was getting into fashion, I was being influenced by Avedon and one or two others. Bailey was the big one. And yes, I think some of it was his early Lennon McCartney stuff, because I'm a big Beatles fan. My mum was a Beatles fan. And the pictures that I'd seen early in my life were Bailey pictures. And I think some of it was probably that connection. And I figured out who he was and what he did and how he did it. But I had an ambition to try and get published in Vogue and stuff like that. And so I looked at the Vogue photographers, and I went way back and looked at them all, and I looked at their influences, and seeing Bailey working in French's studio and realising that French wasn't really a photographer at all. John French, wasn't it? And then seeing Bailey come into his own and see him go to New York and to do stuff for Vogue, and basically telling him to fuck off. And I'm doing it this way. Quite ballsy for a young, 20-year-old guy with no catalogue yet, no real backup work to say I'm doing what I want, and to prove them wrong, and to take pictures like he did of Jean Shrimpton in New York, which, certainly won't have been seen before. I mean, she looks as goofy as all hell stood there. Brilliant, but goofy. And nobody was doing that. Everyone was doing really girl next door, boring, straight-laced, tidy, perfect fashion. And Bailey was like, I think one of the stories is they wanted him to photograph Jean near the lions and all that kind of stuff, and he was like, no, I'm not doing that. What a stupid idea. We're going to do this instead. So he's got to doing that, and in the phone booth, and the guy looking at him, it's not your standard fashion shot now, is it? Never mind then. So that's something that I kind of took from Bailey's influence. That, all right, so this is the mood board. This is what we're going to try and do. But it's just an idea. Let's go with ideas as they happen, as they pop into our heads, as we're influenced, or as the cosmos goes, no, do this. So I tried to build that into my approach to photography, and actually it happened that's how my work kind of was starting to become anyway. I mean, I like the studio because it gives you a lot of control. You're standing there just doing stuff that's relatively easy because you can control the lights. There's no rain, all that other stuff. But then you can also see that when you get out into the street, and you might say, oh, we're going to use this street, this building, because I know it's this, that, and other. The variables there are exciting. People walking past, it might rain, it might not. The sun might not be where you thought it was, so you've got to rejig it. You forgot your reflector. All that kind of exciting stuff, but pressure to still get a picture while you're there is something that I loved and thrived on. And this picture on screen now is a picture of a model I worked with 15, 20 years ago, quite a lot, called Misha. And we were in Manchester just trying to figure it out. And then I came across this little row of this like back street with the garages and stuff on it, and just thought, well, great if I just had 4 of Misha doing various poses down here. So I stuck her against the wall and just said, just move down the wall and take, do various shapes and stuff, and I'll take pictures of you go down. Then I'll make a collage and put 3 or 4 of you on there. And that's what I did. And that kind of approach to doing the photography outdoors came from being influenced by Bailey. Because if you look at his outdoor stuff, particularly around the early 60s, he's just using the shit that he comes across. Big puddles, for example. And it's, you can imagine a Vogue editor, can't you? Was it Newland, one of them going absolutely fucking nuts at him because he'd gone off script. He brought his girlfriend to do a photo shoot and was doing what he wanted. And not only that, he was shooting on 35mm film and then blowing them up to show them because he was supposed to be shooting on medium format. I just love that rebel approach. That, I'm fucking doing this. Bollocks to you. I'm not doing what you're saying I should do. I'm going to do this because I know better than you. And do you know something? One of my favourite quotes of Bailey's is, most editors, most people in the industry are visually illiterate. And he's right. He is right. Because I've said it before in other podcasts, the shit you see put out as being great is rarely great. But Bailey was rarely wrong. And certainly his early Vogue work, and then him going on to publish his own, all that other stuff he did in the early mid-60s, is unsurpassed, I think. And, you'll admit he's not really done fashion much since the 80s, but he's done all the TV advert directing. He's done lots of personal projects in Papua New Guinea and places like that. And you can see, if you look at this picture, his Polaroid here from I think it's Papua New Guinea. If it's not, I'll stick it on the screen. The connection is there, isn't it? is connected with that person. I mean, that person is just looking at Bailey and going, yes, it's me. That's what Bailey wants, do that. Quite often, even with like people that don't know you or are a bit wary of you, they'll try and force something that they're not normally going to do into the photograph, and that doesn't feel like it has. That just feels like this person's gone. Maybe that person didn't even know what the bloody camera was, but whatever Bailey did, he managed to get them centred and still and interesting because of his personality and his approach. And his influence bled into my work across time. This is Lennon McCartney. This is one of the pictures. The other thing that both Bailey and Avedon had an influence on me was with white backgrounds and just simple lighting. Avedon a bit more creative lighting, shall we say, but certainly one light approach and a white backdrop from Bailey just got me quite early on. And I was doing some practice work for my master's degree, and I just got my kids. There's Logan and Evan, my stepson. Logan's my son, Evan's my stepson. And what are they there? God knows how old they were there. 8 or 9, maybe. And just said, like, sit there and pretend you like each other for 5 minutes. But the influence was from the Lennon McCartney shot, and you can see that it's not a copy, it's a theft. And I continued to thieve from Bailey forever because it excites me. And it's quite easy to connect with your kids when you said to them, pretend you like each other for 5 minutes and I'll buy you some sweets, which is probably what I did. But then, if you look at other work, which I did, which is kind of like Bailey, not Bailey-esque, but clearly inspired by Bailey, tight headshots, cropping bits off, white backdrop. I've kind of, alright, black backdrop on that one. It's something that I've picked up because visually it struck me as being interesting. And putting the black border around puts them in the box, but the mind's always thinking what's outside the box. But just cropping something into a box like that makes you focus on them. Eye contact, clear background, no big, massive, horrible shadows or shiny lights or lens flare, not just simple photography. In fact, that's probably the biggest thing outside of his attitude and his approach. I think the simple photography Bailey does, one light, white backdrop, is the thing that really got me into him and made me appreciate what he does to the degree I did. Or I do, sorry. And again, Bailey is still alive, and if I got the chance to meet and speak with him, I'd do it tomorrow, because you see him on shows and interviews and you can tell he's clearly fed up of fucking talking about himself. So maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd just talk about football instead. I don't know. But his influence again is clear in my work because I stole it. I didn't just borrow it and I didn't copy it. I thefted it, thieved it. And it aligned with my approach, my no-nonsense, look, just tell me the fucking truth and we'll do it approach, and my I like it clean and simple and easy because we'll get more done. We'll get it done in no time. We will. Let's have a chat, cup of tea, sit down, do some pictures, go on. We're done. And that's been my approach for many, many years. When I have to do it with a big team and all that, and you're sitting around for 5 hours waiting for makeup, I fucking hate it, I'll be honest with you. I enjoy the 20 minutes I'm shooting, but the rest of the day I'd just sooner be anywhere else. And Bailey has a similar approach, particularly in his early days. Model does her own hair, makeup, all that stuff. She turns up, let's do this, bang, 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 go on. I love that. And some of my recent work that I did with Livia is that very thing which I've just described, of turn up, have a chat, have a drink, set up, clean backdrop, one light, let's do it, bang, gone, happy days. And for me, Bailey is the epitome of simple, natural photography. He even says that he doesn't particularly like photography, he uses it because it's quick. And I can kind of understand that, because when photography is not quick, it's the most boring, laborious art form ever. When you've got to stand around all day waiting for something to happen, it's the pits. But when you've got like-minded people who are bang, bang, bang at it, like Liv was that day, because the second time we worked together, listens, understands, nails it. That's exciting. That's energy. That's what I want to do with people photography. I don't want to be hanging around all day while somebody has another little bit of makeup touched up because somebody don't like it. So Bailey was continues to be a massive influence on me, particularly on my people work and on my approach, not just in photography but in life. I think what Bailey taught me was it's all right to be yourself. If you don't suffer people very well, like I don't, if you get a bit fed up with people and you just want to wring the neck all the time, if that's how you approach life and photography, it's all right, because Bailey made a career doing it. And if it's good enough for Bailey to do it, then I was kind of happy that he wasn't just a yes man or a 3 bags full man, or I'll do whatever it takes to get the gig. He's even famous for like booking high-end clients. I'm going to say Lady Godiva then. I didn't mean Lady Godiva at all. I meant Lady Gaga. And the Beckhams, I think, and people like that, and just saying, in the end, saying, nah, I'll put up with that bullshit. You're bringing an entourage and all that, and I'm into that. If you want to come on your own, take some pictures, we'll do it. But if you want an entourage, go somewhere else. And I think it's great. I think he's never wavered from who he is and how he is. And I think even at 85 or 6-year-old now, whatever he does, still you can still see that bleeding from it, because he's an honest, working class London chap who's worked his fucking arse off for 70 years and reaped the benefits, but never changed. And I think that's for me what the best influencers teach you how to just be you. And he's certainly the biggest one for me in that respect. So there's number 2 in my top 5 list, Mr. David Bailey. Number 1 in the top 5 photographers of all time. So number 1, I would like to describe this person to you, but I can't. Other than to say, to have the presence of mind to do this must have been something akin to a miraculous event. See, I'm lost for words, because what I'm talking about here is a photograph that's potentially 800 years old or so, and the person or persons responsible for taking it, I don't know. So I guess what I'm saying is the top 1 photographer in my all-time top 5 is a ghost. Let's get into that. So, for anybody that doesn't know, in 2020, when the world went crazy over a cold, I spent the time that summer finishing off an idea I'd had for a book off the back of writing an academic paper in 2018, looking at the theft or the obfuscation of photography. And by that I mean I believe that photography's been around forever, as long as people have been able to see. And I think I went some way to proving that in my book, The Obfuscation of Photography. And that was a couple of years of research, observation, doing test work myself, building cameras and devices to take pictures that are supposed to not work. So within that research, I came across a couple of researchers who had decided, building on somebody else's research, to look at whether the Shroud of Turin is in fact a photograph rather than a wrap. And I think they proved pretty soundly that it's entirely possible that the Shroud of Turin is a photograph. The thing we don't have is the names of the people who made the photograph, but they're my number 1 all-time favourite photographers, because 2 reasons. 1, because I think it's about the oldest surviving photograph we've got and we can prove it's a photograph. But B, whoever they were and wherever they were, they had the cojones, the know-how to do it. And for that reason alone, they're my all-time favourite photographer /ers, because having the balls then to take a photograph of whether it's Jesus Christ or just somebody called Jesus or just a person, using that rudimentary proto-photography, as it's called, is quite brilliant. And I used those techniques they were using and some of the equipment they were using. I used the same processes or similar processes to make my own photographs, which worked, which need days and weeks and months sometimes of exposure to work. But when you think about it, when you've got a dead body that's laid there, you've certainly got an ample amount of time before the body decomposes to photograph it. And I think in this case, this is what happened, that the person was photographed for days, weeks, months using rudimentary photography, proto-photography, to make an image. And that's what we see. And if you read the work by Picknett and Allen and the doctor, whose name escapes me, I'm going to put it on screen now because my memory's shot to shit, who first started considering that the shroud might be a photograph. If you look at their findings, their proofs, if you like, that it could be a photograph because they reproduced it using equipment available at the time. The only way they differ to me is they suggest it can't be of Jesus because the timings are wrong, carbon dating and all that. They believe, I think, that it's Leonardo da Vinci that made it, but it can't be of Christ or Jesus because the timing is wrong. In my book, I researched that a little bit wider and discussed the adding of 1,000 years of non-dark age that didn't exist, which fundamentally then aligns that it could have been somebody called Jesus from the time Jesus is supposed to have been alive. You'll have to read the book to get into detail. I don't want to go into detail here. But suffice to say, the Shroud of Turin, in my opinion, is definitely a photograph, and one of many that have been obfuscated from that time and more closer to our times. Talk at length in the book about Da Vinci and how his fumato process is actually a print process, and many pictures he's noted for painting are actually photographs, which were potentially then painted over to hide the fact they were photographs or are still photographs. You just can't see the original for various reasons. If you look at this fumato process, it's a print process. That's not painting. So the fact that the Shroud of Turin is, in my view, the oldest surviving photograph that we're aware of. I mean, I say in the foreword to my book, the oldest surviving photograph is not The View from the Window at the Grass by Joseph Nice von Niepce from either 1826 or 27. And it's not even close to being the oldest photograph. That's why I'm saying that, because my research took me back at least 5,000 years when the ingredients and the camera obscura existed. And it's not much of a leap from painting what are clearly gods and godlike things on caves to photographing them. So my top one photographer or photographers of all time are the people or persons that photograph the Shroud of Turin, because quite simply, in my view, it's the oldest surviving photograph we can access. I'm pretty sure that the Vatican and other places have got probably older ones, which they'll never allow us to see, us mere mortals, but doesn't mean they don't exist. And I think the more people in photography that understand the obfuscation of it, the theft of it, the hiding of it across time, the more we look at other things like events that are told in history to have happened one way when really they potentially happened another. And you can understand why photography would be hidden, can't you? Because you think about all that 1,000 years, you think about, imagine having actual photography or photos from the Roman era, or from, let's say, the Dark Ages did exist from that era, or from anything up to the Napoleonic Wars, Civil Wars, conquistadors, all that stuff. Imagine having photographs of all that. What truth they may tell. So, in my opinion, through deep research, practice, and evaluation, I believe that the whole of the history of photography has been obfuscated, hidden, for nefarious reasons. But if you read the book, it's only a tenner on Amazon. You can have a look at why I think that and why I came to the conclusions I did. But within that, 100% I can tell you that the number one favourite photographer of mine of all time is the person or persons that photographed the Shroud of Turin, because in my highly educated view, it's the oldest surviving photograph we've got that we can access. So there you have it. The people who photographed the Shroud of Turin. So that's it for today, folks. Thanks for having a listen to episode 27. I've outlined my top 5 photographers of all time and why the influences are there, what it means to me, what I do with all that, how I steal, I don't borrow, how I allow my influences, as limited as they are in terms of photographers. I don't have masses of influence. I don't see the latest thing and follow it. I don't see the latest thing and do it. I don't necessarily get influence from photography and other photographers that much in my outlook as a photographer. I'm influenced by life in the main, by shit that happens, not by other photographers. But where I am, I've outlined today where those quite heavy influences are and where they sit with me. There are a few good, excellent photographers actually I noticed around at the minute. They haven't had the same influence on me. Doesn't mean I don't like or appreciate or understand their work. I do. I just feel like the small handful of people I've described today still stay with me, and it's very rare in my experience for people to hold their influence on me in any capacity. I guess we could equate it to musicians, Beatles, Hendrix, Stone Roses. Still hold heavy sway when I'm writing music or when I'm playing guitar. They're still quite prominent. But again, in terms of music, my big influences are quite small. Because I think if you can grab the best of that, steal it, make it your own, and then allow life to influence you in other areas, in terms of stories, ideas, and getting out of your bedroom, getting onto a bike, bus, plane, walk, and fucking see the world and photograph it, that's where the big influences are for me. And particularly since I got over my fear of flying and I'm now travelling the world with Kirsty a bit more, it's I'm excited to see what I can do next, but we'll see. We will see. Anyway, thanks for listening. Have a great afternoon, evening. Do us a favour, like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. It really does help us beat that pesky algorithm. Have a good evening, and I'll catch you all on the flip side. Cheers.
Think about a way to get you out my mind. Think about a way to get you out my mind. Think about a way to get you out my mind. Think about a way to get you out my